excited to talk about rooting the blockchain. So hopefully, I'm sure you guys have heard all about trends related to that, and there's been a lot of activity in the cryptocurrency ecosystem as well. But I think it'll be interesting to hear about how C corporations and Silicon Valley startups that are doing very well in their own category are looking at the technology and ways to leverage that. And so we're lucky to be joined here by Michael Heinrich, who's the CEO of Oh My Green. So
super excited to be here.
Yeah. Welcome, Michael. Really glad you're here. And so, Michael, maybe you could just share a little bit about yourself and Oh My Green.
Sure, happy to do that. So I'm Michael. I'm the founder and CEO of Oh My Green. We are a Y Combinator graduate from summer 2016. And what Oh My Green does is we provide healthy, wellness-aligned, and tech-enabled food service to companies. We work with companies anywhere from large-scale like Apple and Google to mid-sized companies like Lyft and Zenefit to smaller startups as well. And it's been sort of a really exciting journey because we needed to figure out how to scale to tens and tens of thousands of people served a day and had to build a lot of supply chain technology as a result, and super excited to share sort of that journey with you.
Great, Michael. So it sounds like you've had a lot of success in securing some major customers. These are all big companies with a lot of people to feed. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the start and what kind of drove you, or how did this even come about?
Yeah, I initially actually didn't think that I would end up in food, but it really came from a mission-driven passion that I've had. Basically, I've grown up in Berlin, Germany with a grandma that has an organic garden. And as a medical doctor, she would keep telling me that if you don't want to get sick, eat directly from the garden. And it's been so ingrained into me that when I moved to the States and I worked for companies like Microsoft and Bain and Bridgewater Associates, that when I saw the snacks and the food that we've gotten, it was over-processed, super sugared, over-sugared, and I never felt great in that environment. And then at some point I said, I'm going to stop complaining about it and start a company around it. So I went back to grad school at Stanford, and in 2014 took a class by Steve Blank and developed that initial business model around Oh My Green within that class. And then graduated mid-2016 and sort of went through Y Combinator and started scaling the company from there as we sort of discovered the business model. So those were the beginnings.
Great. So I think it sounds wonderful in concept, and that it's definitely a space that I think people have been thinking about a lot in terms of diet. And I don't know if any of you saw Forks Over Knives. That's one that kind of convinces you very well to think about a plant-based diet or just more nutritious diet in general. But I'm sure even though it sounds wonderful, you've encountered different obstacles along the way. So can you just tell us about any of those challenges that you found when you were approaching the companies?
Yeah, I'd say I bucket them sort of into two. One was there's sort of challenge around consciousness of the employees within companies. We've sometimes gotten pushback around, we really like to eat crap. It's literally what people told me. We don't want to switch to something healthy. Healthy tastes like cardboard. It's, I don't want to eat that. And so the initial challenge for us was to find really wellness-aligned products that actually tasted amazing too, so that when people looked at their hot flaming Cheetos and maybe loose cheddar chips, that they would choose the one that has quinoa and chia seeds in it. And what we found is that actually happened over time. So all we had to do is just put the healthier product at high-end sort of hand level and then compare it to the unhealthy product, and people would naturally gravitate towards it as they discovered that it's just as good tasting. And so that was sort of the first major obstacle that we faced. The second one, which was super challenging and way harder than I ever thought it was, is logistics scaling. Building your own supply chain and sort of scaling from 100 people served to 1,000 to tens of thousands to at some point hundreds of thousands and even millions. What we found that if you don't have really good tech systems that understand what your consumption is at a point in time, what your inventory level is at different locations, it becomes super challenging and everything breaks. And so we've had to go through these types of experiences to basically build a supply chain that rivals Amazon's. Our fulfillment rate now is 99.4%. our out-of-stock rate is about 2.5%. Our waste rate is below 1%. And those are staggering statistics. First of all, most people in the food industry will not be able to tell you those statistics because they can't even measure them. Because 43%, according to McKinsey, is digitized, and almost 60% isn't, so people can't even measure. And then only 6% of supply chain players actually understand their supply chain end to end. So this was a huge heroic effort on our part, where all of our engineering and product resources had to be spent on this. And we brought in experts from Amazon, we took what we could, and then we improved on some of these systems as well to get to the state that we're at today, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's really great insight. It's really interesting how you're looking at those numbers. And anyone that's looked at the McKinsey Digitalization Index will see food and agriculture all pretty much red all the way at the bottom. So it's pretty ripe, forgive the pun, opportunity there. So great. So you're doing things now in the blockchain. It'd be great to hear why you started looking at that and what you're thinking about in terms of some of the benefits.
Right. So the reason why we started looking at it is, well, before I go there, so our supply chain, just to describe it real quick, is full stack. We do everything. So even starting to do production of food items now. So it goes from production to warehousing to commercial kitchens to driver management to retail management at the customer side. So displays and planograms and stocking schedules to then order and budget management. So we basically touch almost every piece of the supply chain. And so we've had to build technology on every piece of that to manage it. And what happened is, as we kept getting better and better, other players in the industry noticed, including our competitors, and they started approaching us saying, well, how can we use your technology? Because for us, we've got 20 different POS systems. They don't talk to each other. We've got a warehouse system that doesn't talk to our ordering system. So we've got a lot of people just reconciling transactions all the time. So then we started thinking about the problem. And we started looking at blockchain because of the distributed sort of ledger technology, which lends itself really well to supply chain. Because not only can you track and trace the origin of products, but you can also start really looking into, well, what's the inventory state at this particular node in the network? What's the demand signal? What is it here? And then start optimizing the entire network because everybody's sharing information with each other. That's usually not possible today because my supplier might have an SAP system, I might have a NetSuite system, my retailer might have an Oracle system, and it's really hard to integrate all of them. And so we started looking at this use case and saying there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're starting to write our own supply chain protocol as a result. So,
yeah, so that's great. And somebody could say, okay, well, maybe you've got a great technology and a great system in place, but you could build that as a web application. What are the reasons that you would want this, or what are the kind of long-term kind of factors that you were thinking about on why you really want to use decentralization? What are the benefits there? Yeah,
that's a great question, because why not just put up a central server and then have a bunch of people participate? I see actually a lot of power in the blockchain and decentralization because it's better, faster, and cheaper. It's faster because something like Visa can process tens of thousands of transactions a second. But if you're doing sort of delegated proof of stake with multi-chain and sharding, you can get to millions, if not billions, of transactions a second. And so it can be a lot faster. If you use that architecture, you almost have no transaction fees. So you can make it super cheap to interact with different players and exchange money. And then it's better because you can sort of have a lot of trust by saying the network itself regulates it versus just one centralized player that you have to trust. And then on top of that, you can do a lot of interesting things with the blockchain. So for example, we're writing a social good mechanism into the blockchain so that everybody who participates also gives back, because that's part of our sort of social mission. And on top of that, a lot of the source code is often also really transparent and available, so you can actually trust and see what people are doing on this particular blockchain. So for those reasons, we got super excited about this technology. Actually, one more, it's also, you can't go back in history and modify the transactions, you can only add. So you can keep everybody honest that way because you can consistently audit and see what happened in the past as a result. So for all of these reasons, decentralization made a lot of sense for this platform.
So along with decentralization, often people are developing different tokenomics, different models there. I think it's a burgeoning field. There's still a lot of unknowns, and we'll see kind of how these things work out over time. So within your ecosystem, just help us to rationalize a little bit about how different players or entities that are operating within there could use a token, for example.
Right. So that's a great question. I would preface it a little bit with my personal belief is that blockchain without a token for new and upcoming networks does not make sense. Because if you're building a network, it takes a long time to get the network effects going because the first player that's joining it, they're like, what's the benefit to me? Why am I even on this? There's like, oh, my green and myself, like what does it matter? But with a token offering, you can actually incentivize people. You say like, well, here's 1 million tokens from my green. If you move your systems through this, you can use this to pay us. And so then they're like, oh, I get free money? Well, this is awesome. And so I think a token sort of offering is really important as part of that. And so you could use what we call Oh My Green Coin on this platform to do various things. For example, finance your invoices, pay for invoices or other vendors that are on the platform, pay for smart contracts or utilizing different types of apps that are on the platform. So for example, our warehouse management app, we will be releasing it on this protocol, and then you can use the token to pay for the functionality, for instance. So those are some of the potential use cases.
Great. So who do you think will win in this wider space? Maybe I don't know if you want to share other examples of things or solutions that are out there today or other kind of signals that you've seen.
Yeah, it's a $1 million question. Not an easy answer because I can't see the future, but I can give you my point of view. There are different efforts by different startups that are starting within the supply chain space, and there's also bigger players starting to look at it, like UPS or Walmart or an Amazon. My personal view is that those players will not necessarily be successful. I think it's the fully open network that will be successful over time because the likelihood of Amazon joining a Walmart-based chain is very low, and so all these chains will start to splinter off, and then you've just got bifurcation happening. But what you really need is everybody on the same network, because then you can get a lot of efficiencies from people being on these different nodes. Because if you have a glut of bananas here, for example, and there's a minus at this retail location, you can just have a smart contract that automatically moves these two. And so, to me, the more players there are on the network, the better. So I think the open network will win over time.
Great. And so you already have a company that's growing, looked at as very successful already, and as a C corporation. How are you navigating the regulatory environment, and what could that even potentially mean if you're also putting on a token for the prospects of a future acquisition? I'm sure a lot of different companies that are now seeing this kind of tremendous growth in utilization of blockchain that maybe have already gone down a certain path, a more traditional path, are thinking about that, and you're kind of electing to take that road. And so it'd be great to hear just kind of some of your thought process around that and how you've looked at it so far.
Yeah, it's again a great question because there's a lot of uncertainty in the regulatory environment right now. So the best thing on our end, because we already have an existing C Corp that's growing very rapidly, is to just approach it with a lot of precaution and just take the stance that all of these things are securities offerings, so we're going to be compliant with all of the SEC rules. So Rule 144, Reg D, Reg S, SEC 506B, 506C. So I spend a lot of time basically getting to understand what the SEC rules are so that we can actually comply with them, because we want to limit risk for the existing C Corp and make sure that the new sort of entity that we're creating has good sustainability. And the way we're structuring it is that we have a separate B Corp that essentially holds the tokens, licenses the technology from Omai Green, and as a result pays for that technology. So it's sort of arm's length transaction as well. But I'm happy to chat more about that.
Perfect. You just answered my last question about the relationship between the two entities. That's perfect. I think we're out of time, but I'll just ask one really quick one. Just tell us a little bit about the roadmap and when we might be seeing this.
So it takes a while because we have to build the actual infrastructure first and then build all of the supply chain applications we've built on top of that. So we're looking at releasing a mainnet sometime next year, Q2, as a result, just because of the infrastructure layer needing to be built fully.
Yeah, I think that's great. Slow and steady wins the race. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining us.
All right, everyone. Big thank you to Michael Heinrich and Martin Stroka.